Hello VC, my name's Harvey and welcome to the latest video upload for my channel Spinning the Black Circle. I say latest, it's been something like 2.5 years pre-pandemic since my last video upload, and I do apologise. Nothing in particular, nothing's been wrong, everything's good here, bringing up 2 kids, lots of work. So I took a break, but everything's good and I hope it is with you too. And I want to say a big thank you to the subscribers that I've continued to gain despite not doing any new material in that intervening period. I've had some really lovely comments too about the uploads that are on my YouTube channel, and also some people asking, are you okay, because you haven't posted for a while. So thank you for all of that. I am fine, and I'm looking forward to now definitely regularly being back on here with hopefully at least a couple of videos or more per week to add to the content that's already up there. The good news is that I have massively expanded my vinyl record collection, both during and post pandemic, if indeed we are out of pandemic. Hopefully we are. So something like 800 albums since the last video post, and continue to feed that habit, very rewarding habit. So there's plenty to talk about, lots of topics that I have in the canon to discuss, lots of ideas. I've been inspired too by the growth and quality of VC. Norman Mazzy's posts, really inspiring. Bob Bradley, I've really enjoyed. 45 RPM. Michael, the audiophile from Germany, his is different, and his passion for that, the sound quality of those records, and that's his obviously that's his bent towards what our hobby is something different. I've really enjoyed that. And then Telegram Sam too. I think she's don't think she had a YouTube channel when I last posted, but that is clearly going from strength to strength, and that's just a name but 4. There's lots of fantastic VC out there, so look forward to getting stuck back in as a contributor rather than just observing those and being quite lazy. So I'm back for good, hopefully. And obviously the collection has expanded, as I say, so vastly. I can't hope to cover and play catch up over this video. It would be too long. You don't want a 10-hour video about what I've bought. So I'm going to keep this short with just a handful of purchases. I'm going to talk about one. My key RSD purchase. I made a number of purchases on RSD, but the key one for me, I'm going to talk about a brand new jazz artist, a classic jazz album that I bought, and a couple more solid back catalogue LPs that I recently bought. But these are just the first VC on recent finds and one RSD release that I'm gonna talk about. So let's get stuck in then. Certainly since I last posted, there have been so many great jazz reissues, from the Blue Note Classics to the Tone Poets series. I mean, it's just been wonderful, hasn't it? And now we're getting into the prestige stuff that's going to come out via Acoustic Sounds and the contemporary record stuff. So it's really exciting time. I'm already into jazz. I was already buying jazz, and I did a few jazz posts on here. But what I'm going to do in one of my future videos is talk about that entire Blue Note Classic series catalog. The first stint that ended last December. I'm going to do a video where I talk through each one of those and give a view on them, because I've bought all of them on vinyl. But the RSD release that I think excited jazz fans, possibly more than any other, depending on your opinion, was this Art Power Meets the Rhythm Section LP, which is the first in the series of Contemporary Records Acoustic Sound series reissues, audiophile reissues via Craft. And this is the mono edition. I believe the stereo edition is coming out later in the year, which is good, because it means that this is not a one-time only for people who managed to get it on our record store day, but it's on that wonderful Contemporary Records label, and it is absolutely astonishing. Not just the quality, audiophile quality of the vinyl, which you'd expect. Bernie Grunman mastered this. It's clearly, as it states from the original analog tapes, incredibly crisp and clear, considering it's recorded in 1958. But it's just a reminder of what a canon classic jazz LP this Art Pepper album is. It was recorded in something like well, it was recorded in one day when he wasn't really prepared for it, right? He was he's in a bad way at the time. I think he was struggling with drugs and just generally not with it. And then it helps when you've got effectively 2/3 of the Miles Davis quintet and the band, Red Garland, Paul Chambers, and Philly Joe Jones on drums. But I mean, how he locked into the band on that in that circumstance in one day in January 1958. I mean, it's just telepathic the way that he anchors to that rhythm section. It's an absolutely tremendous LP. Add to the fact that it's a quality vinyl reissue. So man, I mean, mono stereo albums that were originally intended to be mono, in my opinion, tend to sound better. This is no exception if I compare this to the streamed version of it. But having said that, I bet that the stereo version that comes out of this later in the year, again, if it's well, it's going to be an acoustic sounds Bernie Grundman master from the original tape, so it's still going to be fantastic. So if you manage to get this mono edition, then great. But I'm pleased that they have decided to bring this out in stereo, and this is the first of those acoustic sound reissues on this Contemporary Records label. So it's really exciting as a starter for where this label might go. A tremendous LP. You know, check out biography, Art Pepper. You know, as I mentioned, drugs earlier, and some potentially dodgy stuff in his past. But here, look, if we judged every musician on that basis, we never listen to anything. I think it's so the damaged musicians that have been great at what they did. So that is what it is, and I guess suppose slightly beside the point. But anyway, this was definitely my key record store day release, because it's not an ephemera buy. It's not a coloured vinyl or something that you wouldn't normally get. I would have bought this anyway, and I'm really pleased to have it. And I'm really pleased that a lot of the VC have featured this as a key release for RSD too. Right, so we're going to stick with jazz for the next two albums. Actually, I'm going to bring you right up to date with an LP that came out digitally late last year, but just came out in the last few weeks. And it's from the UK jazz scene. I know there'll be some US subscribers watching who have found this video. UK jazz is going from strength to strength. You've kind of got this two-pronged attack with the London jazz sound, which is more brash, contemporary jazz, led by Shabaka Hutchins, who I'll come back to, and artists like Ashley Henry, Yaz Ahmed, incredibly powerful London scene from those guys. Comet is Coming too, which Shabaka Hutchins is part of. Then you've got this northern scene led by people like Matthew Halsell, and Work Money Death, and Emma Jean Thackeray, which is more avant-garde, experimental, or some of it's more laid back as well, but it's more out there. And so adding those two together, it's such an incredibly powerful scene. I missed out Nubia Garcia. If you haven't got this LP, I'm not featuring this, but if you haven't got this LP, it's probably the Keystone One, sourced by Nubia Garcia, which came out during the pandemic, actually. That's the key anchor jazz release I would start with. UK jazz fans must be aware of this because of that UK scene is burgeoning. But if you're not, if you're in the US or elsewhere in the world, check out Source by Nubia Garcia. It's going to be the entry to that UK jazz stuff, and I can talk about that in detail another time. But anyway, that's not even the LP I'm going to feature, right? The album I'm going to feature is by part of that London scene, female jazz saxophonist Chelsea Carmichael, and her debut LP, The River Doesn't Like Strangers, which has just been released, as I say, on vinyl the last few weeks via Shabaka Hutchins, who's really the artist who's going across this scene and influencing a lot of it. He produced this LP, and it's his first release on his new London jazz label, Native Rebels. This is such a great jazz LP. She is melodic, her tone is beautiful, but it's also experimental. It pulls in influences of African music, hip hop, but not to the extent that there's any hip hop on this LP. It's just got that tone to it, and bits of breakbeat as well. But mainly this is a jazz LP by a really exciting new talent on saxophone, Chelsea Carmichael. You can stream this digitally everywhere. It's you probably want to get hold of this on vinyl if you like. I don't know how many copies that independent label Native Rebels will actually release. I had to go to London to hunt it down when I lived 200 miles away. It wasn't that easy to get. But who knows, it might just be a distribution problem. But stream it and see if you like it, and if you do, I highly recommend for jazz fans. Again, if you want to just see what I'm saying about this UK jazz scene is all about, then I'd struggle to imagine a jazz fan who wouldn't enjoy The Riverton Like Strangers by Chelsea Carmichael, because it's that mix of gorgeously melodic with very experimental, pushing the envelope, just fantastic jazz music. So I think maybe it's two then. I didn't plan on featuring this, but if you want to try two albums from the UK jazz scene, then Source by Nabaya Garcia and The Riverton Like Strangers by Chelsea Carmichael. I'm sorry, US subscribers, but the UK jazz scene is way ahead at the moment. I'll hope to prove via future videos. There's a lot happening over here for some reason. So we're going to continue talking about jazz, but go right back again to the same oddly enough, I've just realised is the Art Pepper album, to a Prestige album by John Coltrane named Setting the Pace. I need to really expand my Coltrane collection. I've got Giant Steps. I've got the recent Acoustic Sounds reissue of A Love Supreme, and I've got Coltrane ballads. But other than that, that's it. I need to massively expand it, and this is my first step towards that. What's exciting about this is it's on the it is a reissue, but it's on the original Jazz Classics Prestige reissue program, which I think this is 1980s. Oh, the sound quality is just fantastic on this, right? And it's Coltrane at that stage where he was pushing the envelope, but not yet over the top and into that avant-garde sound. I have to admit, I probably like that period more than the later stuff. I really, obviously, fantastically enjoy Love Supreme, and I like some of the later stuff, Ascension, for example. But for me, the earlier stuff he did on Atlantic and Prestige, it's more palatable. Not that I'm afraid of free jazz or avant-garde stuff, but I don't always want to be challenged when I listen to music, and this, along with albums like ballads, is just an easier listen. I mean, he does still push the envelope on this, but generally it's more laid back stuff, and his ability as a melodic saxophonist, comes through in spades on this LP. So 1958, Setting the Pace. Be a good one actually if you're starting out with Coltrane. I get frustrated when I hear people say, first 10 jazz albums to buy A Love Supreme. It's too much if you haven't heard a jazz LP at all, and you start with A Love Supreme. I'm not saying it's the most challenging listen, but that's quite a difficult listen for someone who hasn't actually heard 45 minutes of jazz. So you might, with Coltrane, be better off starting one of these early LPs. Something like this, something like Ballads or Coltrane Sound, something like that. Or Blue Train on the album he did on the Blue Note label. Something that's easier to get into. Then you can progress to the more avant-garde John Coltrane stuff. So anyway, Setting the Pace by John Coltrane. I was really happy to find this for about £12 in the UK. It one of my favourite record store just down the road, Segatron Records, in their second-hand jazz bin. And as I say, it's an original Jazz Classics from the original master tapes. I think these were from the 1980s, but if you can get a hold of these, because they were non-digital from the original master tapes and really carefully mastered, there's nothing fancy about any of the covers. Quite a hard cover though, quite nice, with a kind of tip-on style jacket on the back. But anyway, the music, I love this LP, and it's an easy access point. John Coltrane, so I'm a big fan. So that's the 3 jazz LPs, just 2 more albums to feature. Now for something completely different. So let me just let me just preface this next selection. There are a ton of LPs, obviously, that you get excited about, where because they're quite rare, you want them even more. And I'm trying to steer myself away from that, actually, you know. And that applies to that 90s period, doesn't it, where everything was switched to CD, and therefore it becomes that the reason you really, really, really want something is almost because you can't get it, right? I'm trying to move away from that. And this is an example of where the opposite applies, where this album is not that well known to most, but was in such abundance. It's really easy to get for a few pounds from Discogs, but it's absolutely fantastic. And it's not the typical Canon LPs that you haven't heard at all. So anyway, that's enough of a preface, but it's the opposite of that. I want it because I can't get it. And it's an album by a French electronic trio from the 70s named Space, and the album is named Magic Fly. So the title track from this was quite a big instrumental hit in the UK. Really progressive electronic music. How Daft Punk didn't get sued by this band is beyond me. I mean, they've got space helmets on, not a million miles away from that Daft Punk robotics thing that they did. And you know, Daft Punk is very relevant to this stuff too. It's for 1977, it's incredibly progressive. The sounds they create on synthesizer. You know, obviously this was post Giorgio Moroder was already doing his thing. Kraftwerk were already doing things. You'd already had Sergio Gainsbourg, but it's still, and actually the consistency of this album too, it's absolutely fantastic. It's and for an album that is, other than the last track, entirely instrumental, there's some vocals on the final track, it holds your attention across all the tracks, and it's not just a single, it's worthwhile. And stream this, and if you like it, there are so many copies available of this on Discogs for something like £4 to £5 in VG Plus condition. I'd highly recommend you get a hold of this if you like what you hear on if you stream it on Spotify or somewhere, or even on YouTube. If you don't have a streaming service, it is great. And this is what I mean, right? If the title track hadn't been a UK hit, this would have been quite rare. And I'm betting if that was the case, because it's so good, you'd be talking about £200 or £250 a copy for this. But it's only a result of how popular it was because of that UK hit, and how omnipresent all the copies were, that you can get this. There's so many copies, it's just about availability, right? And so we've got to try and break through this barrier, I think, as record collectors, of thinking of things as value-based because of that monetary value, and actually down to the music, right? I'm not suggesting you don't go and find what you want. I'm just saying, I'll catch myself sometimes, you know, thinking, oh, that's £300 and you can't get it, so I need it. Whereas actually, this is an example of where, because of the market it's in and because it's readily available, it's easy to get, cheap, but it's just as worthwhile as those expensive albums. So anyway, Magic Fly by Space, highly recommend that if you like electronic music, if you like Daft Punk, you know, if you like updated things like Air. Air's a good parable for what this sounds like, a lot like the French band Air. So yeah, Magic Fly by Space is a good one. Last but not least, a band that I got into during the pandemic, who I definitely need a lot more stuff by, and that is the Crusaders. And this is their 1976 LP, Those Southern Nights. And before I really started taking notice of Crusaders, I kind of had them down as funk and soul also-rangs. I knew they were good, right? I'd heard Street Life, I'd heard some of that early stuff, and I'd even enjoyed the double LP Southern Comfort, which I think is the 2 albums or 1 album before this. But I didn't realise the depth of their stuff and how much influence they had. They were actually, I would compare them to the influence that the Chic organisation did. When you consider the musicians in this band, Styx Hooper, the drummer, then you had Wilton Felder on saxophone, Joe Sample on keyboards, incredible musicians, and their influence stretched across that Southern Soul stuff. They did lots of solo albums, lots of things with other artists. So I didn't realise just how good the Crusaders were. And this LP, you know, I've only got this in Southern Comfort at the minute. It's just the start of my journey on this, and I hope that in a few months or a year or two, I come back and do a full Crusaders episode just about their back catalogue, because I think I'm at the tip of the iceberg of how great they are. And what makes me think that is I went to a DJ set recently by two chaps who are friends in the Midlands, and they did a funk night where they predominantly focused on the Crusaders and spin-off stuff. And the music was so rich. It was just incredible, including some of the solo stuff from artists like Wilton Felder, who's the saxophonist on here. And so I really do need to investigate the Crusaders more. And this is a great starting point, because those sort of nights, I'm a big funk fan, but I didn't realise how great the Crusaders were until I really started digging in. So hopefully this is the start of when you just started getting in the band and you're excited. That's hopefully how it goes with the Crusaders. So there you go then. That was a whistle stop tour of just 5 of the something like 800 LPs that I've bought over the past 2.5 years. I'll probably do another vinyl finds episode, and then I'll go into something that's interesting, topic based. Maybe that entire Blue Note Classics series video or something else, or get a conversation going around something that's a bit more challenging, rather than just lots of finds videos. And I'll continue to do that thing I did pre-pandemic, which is Great Lost Albums too. I'll come back to that. I think that was quite a series that was of episodes that were quite compelling or enjoyable to some of you out there. So there you go then. I am back and hopefully going nowhere. Please like, subscribe, comment. Love to hear what you've got to say, or anything that you think about the albums that I've shown today. Any thoughts you agree with, disagree, challenge, and I'd love to hear it. So until next time then, from Spinning the Black Circle, take care.